everyone, welcome back to Ask a VC. My name is Ryan Floyd. I'm a managing director at Storm Ventures, and we invest in early stage B2B SaaS companies. And in this video series, try to give you some thoughts and advice as if I was an investor or maybe on the board of your company. And today we're going to talk about how to hire a VP of sales, and I'm here with my good friend, Mark.
Ryan, good to be here today.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, you can see from the gray hair over 30 years of sales leadership experience, and half that has been early stage, beginning of my career at Xerox and Cisco, and early stage, and now typically I'm engaged really doing go-to-market consulting. And over the years of being in early stage firms, I've worked on an approach to that, and I've been doing that over the last 17 months, and it's been a blast. 8 different companies.
And in fact, I think the inspiration actually here is that, you've done such a great job with a bunch of our companies. I thought it'd be great to share it a little more broadly with the community with some tidbits. And we thought we'd start with something really basic today that sounds simple, but is incredibly hard to do. And that's really to hire a VP of sales. Sales executives, it's really tricky for a lot of different reasons, but there's a lot of mistakes and things that people make in the process that I think generally can be avoided. And maybe just to get started, I mean, when you think about you've started consulting with a company, they need to hire, let's say, their first VP of sales.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. How do you start? How do you even, think about framing that first? What's most important?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, observations, 7 out of 7 engagements that I've been since my last operating role, all tech-centric CEOs. And what's interesting is the formula they've used to hire their VP of engineering, their product management, product marketing, it hasn't really served them well in hiring sales leaders. It's pretty interesting. And a lot of the engagements I'm on, they're on their second or third sales leader. And they really become kind of consciously incompetent about hiring a sales leader at that point in time with those false positives.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true in your engagements, but I mean, to amplify that, in my experience, just there's so many founders that are, really deep on the engineering side,
yes,
really deep on the product side,
yes,
but have never necessarily been on the sales side. So it's more unfamiliar territory, and I think in general it just means it's a little hard maybe to hire for.
Yeah, so I think the formula for that is actually to get formulaic about it and really start with a good understanding of what's your operating plan for the year, what are the metrics you really need to hit from a revenue generation standpoint, profitability standpoint. And from there, really get to a strategic plan of 3 or 4 initiatives that you're really going to drive, what you're not going to do, and make that as declared as your plan of record for products. Put that to paper, and then and only then really consider what kind of structure do you need to hit those operating objectives, to execute on that strategy. And that structure, then don't go hiring until you've really done that. You've figured out how many reps do you need, what kind of sales leader might you need. And then do the comp planning as well. Tie it all the way down to how you're going to compensate this person. What are the critical success factors that they'll have that will tie to the compensation?
Just to make your point, just to jump in, I think it's you got to think about everything you're trying to accomplish, because often what happens, you think, I got to hire a VP of sales, They start interviewing, and sales leaders are going to want to know, what's my goal?
Yes.
What do I have to hit? What are the resources I have to hit that? How many people, how many AEs exist? How many do I need to hire?
Yes.
And if you're not thoughtful about that, if I was a VP of sales, that'd be a red flag. I would be nervous about joining that company,
yes,
because I might think, look, I'm going to step into this thing and I'm going to be set up for failure because no one really knows the bogey I got to hit.
So, absolutely. And top sales leaders are going to be smoking that out.
Yeah.
And by comparison, if you come with a really defined plan that you want them to accomplish, you've already figured out kind of the key compensation elements, what kind of hiring you need to do, what kind of ramp is in the operating plan, that'll really speak to how serious and the right time to go hire this sales leader. So let's say you got your plan.
I know I need to hire the
Yeah.
sales leader.
How do you go do it? And it all starts with the spec. Just like in any other aspect of the business, you should have defined spec. And I really think it comes down to three things. Think about a Venn diagram, right? First would be, what's the functional experience that they have? Second, domain experience. And third, customer experience. So the functional experience is really, really important. So have they been a sales leader in the type of motion that you're going to have, enterprise, mid-market? Other thing today is, do they have a good experience in modern pipeline development? Because in large companies, marketing and brand can be driving a lot of the pipeline development. AEs, not BDRs, AEs need to be driving pipeline, and it all starts with the sales leader that's bought into that.
As opposed to here, you're just going to get a bunch of leads.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That sets up for failure. Well, before we can maybe get into it, let's go back to just the functional extra, because I think this is really important.
Yeah.
I think about it often in the sense of like ACVs.
Yeah.
If your ACVs, let's say it's founder-led sales, you've got $1 million, let's say, of ARR today, and you've been closing $100,000 deals, you need to find a VP that knows how to close 100,000 or greater deals. Right?
That's right.
And the opposite is true too, that if you're closing 30, 40 kind of quick, high velocity, smaller deals in maybe the mid-market, hiring a VP that only knows how to close or has substantial experience closing 100K, 200K deals is not going to be a great fit, because they're going to be used to more strategic selling, account-based motion versus a higher velocity of close. The types of AEs they hire, right? That's what you're going out with the functional stuff.
Absolutely. And if you know that, and back to why you need a strategic plan before you're going to go hire, you can see that in the person's resume. Resumes for top sales leadership and professionals should have a ton of numbers in them. You should be able to see the average order sizes. They should name names about the type of deals that they won. And that can validate that fit, functional fit for the role. The other thing I'd say is, I often replace sales leaders that just drafted on the sales go-to-market that they're comfortable with, whether it's aligned to the business or not.
Right. I got a hammer, everything's in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if I was an enterprise guy, I'm not going to focus on mid-market. And yet, if you really do the analysis, mid-market can be a lot shorter sales cycles, and the average order size is really, really good in those types of situations.
And I think this gets back to really defining the spec, like you said, because you have to know walking into it, what is that profile in terms of who I'm trying to, like, what is that experience set? What is that functional expertise that I want? How about you mentioned domain?
Yeah, domains, I mean, the nature of a Venn diagram, you want somebody that's got all three if you can. That's the bullseye. Somebody with the right domain experience, right functional experience, or right customer experience that you want to go after. But I think oftentimes tech-centric CEOs will lean on the domain experience more than the functional experience, to the peril. A domain experience can really be learned. I mean, the 7 engagements that I've been in, helping CEOs really chart their go-to-market plan, helping them hire, and helping them get past quarters over plan. I pick up the tech domain, and so much is common across selling different technologies when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I think, a derivative of that might be, looking at, instead of necessarily that domain expertise, maybe what level they've been selling into.
Yeah.
Like what are they, are they used to selling at the C-suite? Are they used to selling at the VP or director level? And that'll help. But I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes the overweighting on that domain expertise, it's a mistake, because the functional is so much more important. I think ultimately success. I would say there's probably maybe 2 exceptions to that, and you got some security experience too. So I don't know what you think, but when you get into very technical domains like security, there is a language that can be difficult for people to pick up if they don't have a history in that space, or I don't know, maybe something today like data engineering, where it just it's going to require a little bit more maybe technical depth. It's not saying if it's rocket science, but maybe in some of those cases, domain experiences.
Yeah, let me pick up on that. I think let's take like the OSI stack, the networking. So physical layer to business application layer, I really spend time on that from the technical domain standpoint. Because if you're going to hire somebody for a business application that's only sold to infrastructure, they're going to be lost in a business application sale. And same in true reverse. I think that's really critical to kind of, if somebody's been doing a business application sale and they don't have any AI experience, I think they'll pick up that AI business application experience real quick. But I've seen places where they've hired infrastructure level folks to do business application sales, and they don't know what they don't know. The other marker for that is the third element of the Venn diagram, which is, well, what customers can they have as references? Where have they sold? That ought to be in the resume. They ought to be pretty proud of selling a $3 million AOR deal to make it worth Mellon. It ought to be in there. Right. And then go use that as part of your reference process too. If you get customer references, that's great. Having said that, Rolodex is not so transferable. And I think of the three elements, that's a nice to have element. The other two, domain experience, functional experience, are critical.
And on the customer one that comes in, since you mentioned that finance, oftentimes those customers in a particular domain also have specific requirements in terms of how you're, whether like compliance or things like that, that even if it's a different product, understanding how to sell into that group is really important.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think keeping the Venn diagram, because a Venn diagram with 4 circles would be a problem. The other element I'd really think about, though, and you just can't emphasize it enough, is all that experience has to be stage appropriate for where the company is.
Yes.
So often, hey, I hired a guy that's managed $1 billion in revenue, and you're at 30 million in ARR. Those are different experiences. You need somebody that's stage appropriate. It's so critical. And I'll tell you, the other thing I've seen is, it seems simple. It's an early stage firm is no place to learn on the job. You have to have the experience. And I think now the balance between employer and employee is kind of getting more healthy. You should really, not hire somebody that doesn't have the stage appropriate experience.
But I think it's important, the right fit though. That also means if someone has been running a couple hundred person, let's say, organization, and they're joining, say, this hypothetical example we were just talking about with $1 million of ARR, they're going to make their first AE hire.
Yeah,
that's probably not going to be the right fit.
Totally.
Right? It could be, but it's a flag. It's something you really have to get comfortable with, because that experience that executive has with 100 people underneath them is going to be very different than the small startup.
Yeah. I think there's some ways to really root that out in the interview process, though.
Yeah, with the questions, which let's get to that here in a second. How about the situation though, where I've got this hypothetical $1 million of ARR. I'm having a really hard time hiring someone that's got a lot of experience, because look, my business is risky, it's early, and maybe I should take a risk on someone who's never been a VP before. Like, how would you think about that? Like, do they have to have done that specific job before, or like how would one think about that?
Yeah, so I often think too that if we're talking about $1 million in revenue ARR, that's a Series A or a Series B firm, maybe C, a C. The most important thing if you're hiring a sales leader is to get somebody who has deep first line sales experience. They're making sales calls. They can bring Pied Piper. They can bring reps with them that you'd really want to hire. Those are tells that they're first line sales oriented. They're going to spend a ton of time making customer calls, less time in reporting. Those are some markers for that type of person. But sometimes you will have to, go hire. A classic one is to hire a really decorated rep and make them that first sales hire. And you can really hack the system by doing that. But the thing that I would do is, and it's good for them as well, is part of the interview process I declare up front, is they need to come together with a 30, 60, 90-day plan as part of the interview process. And you can really then tell, can they put black marks on white paper to strategically plan, even
Right.
tactically plan,
Right.
30, 60, 90 days. How do they prioritize what they're going to be doing
Yeah.
that time period?
Right, because even if they haven't done that before, it says a lot if they're able to put that
Yeah.
together, where they can maybe draw on some resources they have, mentors that they have,
Yeah.
and then present. So
And how can they present it too? It's also a tell for
Right.
how they're going to be in front of customers even before they're representing your product. Can they sell themselves? And if you're not buying what they're selling, probably not going to be buying your product either, customers.
So this plan, I think this, just to dive in this a little bit more, I think this is really important. I think first cars, any exec that you hire, giving them a little bit of an assignment,
Yep.
to put some
An
thought together,
abstract.
an abstract.
We
yeah.
give them an abstract, so it's real data.
Yep.
So it's not a hypothetical situation.
Right.
It really could be their onboarding plan.
Right, or at least the beginnings of it.
Yeah.
Because I think it does two things. It definitely reflects their thought process in terms of how they think about it. And you'll very quickly figure out, you may find it's a complete left turn from what you're thinking about. And that's better to find out now than on day one of the hire,
That's
right? And then, I think too, it just gives more context to having a thoughtful conversation in an interview process than, kind of generalities, right? You really then have something to really talk about. Well, why do you think you need to have a couple of extra people here? Why would you hire them here? What's your thought process behind that? And it's good. And there's a lot of these things, there's no right and wrong answer to them. It's more about understanding how someone kind of approaches it, right?
Exactly right. And you really get to see how they think. And can they step above themselves? If they've been a really successful salesperson, do they know one? If you read the Challenger sale, which is still really relevant today, that lone wolf who really can't demonstrate why they were successful is not going to be a great sales leader. And that could be a top performer, but it doesn't mean they're going to be a top performer as a sales leader.
Right.
And the other benefit of it too is I've used it about 20% of the time. The person will bow out the week before. They're not going to do the work, which is a great tell. I want them out of that process quicker. Also, I use it to not have 10 interviews in the interview process. I'll record it and have some people view it and give their opinion on it as well. I've used it that way, so you can really verify the interview process and build it for speed. And then again, that 30, 60, 90 day plan lets you know that they're going to hit the ground running.
Right. Yeah. Well, hopefully, you get even more out of it if they can go that far. But I think with that, one of the mistakes I sometimes see folks make is that homework assignment is unreasonable.
Yes.
Like it's a balance, right?
Yes.
Because you have to respect the fact that if it's a great candidate, they're likely looking at a couple of opportunities, and they're not gonna be as interested in doing like free consulting for several weeks, right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to balance it and understand really what the purpose is, and if you can get that onboarding plan out of it, that's great. To me, I just kind of think of it as more you get an insight into how they think, really. And it gives you that context to really have a better experience interviewing the candidate.
Yeah, I think it's such a big hack that I'd also give the coaching that in the interview process, for this sales leader, you're going to have that first meeting where it's some selling and some interviewing, mostly selling, likely. Then you should have a deep dive interview process. At the end of that deep dive interview process, I would bring up what the whole interview process is. A top sales leader is going to love that it's defined.
Right.
And let them know that there's going to be this challenge in the process, a 30, 60, 90 day plan they're going to do. They're going to get documentation around it. And, oh, by the way, if this is back to our thought, if this is the first sales leader role they're going to have, I deposit the idea they really shouldn't go to a company that wouldn't ask this to be done.
Right.
So it really positions it well.
Right.
And competitively, if you're in a competitive situation, other companies are not asking for it, makes them wonder why.
Yeah, right. Gives them good insight. Yeah, and as you're walking through that made me think too, I think it's probably intimidating again for, let's say, a founder that's never run sales, they're thinking, oh, hey, Mark Ryan, this all sounds great, but like, how do I really evaluate a 60, 90-day plan? I think this is a great example too of bringing other people into the process that know more about it than you do, right? If I was interviewing a VP of engineering, right, I could ask a lot of questions, but I would certainly have someone that's technical be in the interview process as well.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that person inside of your company, you can look to people like you, consultants that can maybe, to help them. People on the channel know, like, I don't have a great perspective, like opinion about most consultants. I think most of them are, frankly, a waste of money. But if you think about the sales consultant maybe as someone that's, if you could hire them as your VP in 2 years, that's kind of the profile, right, of who you want to help you evaluate the plan. And it's a relatively easy thing for someone that knows sales to be able to do. High impact, right?
Yeah.
I imagine you probably know very quickly when you look at these plans that people put together, what makes sense and what's a little bit off. And
it's it brings up a good point. Is also, when should a CEO engage a sales advisor? And I think too often it's too late. And actually, I met with a founder yesterday that they're pre-revenue, and it's still applicable because you can have product market fit, but don't conflate that with product go-to-market fit.
Right.
And you need planning for that, or you're going to have inefficiency in that process of bringing in 1 to 5 reps and then scaling thereafter. But just break it down to first principles. How does this person talk about customer engagement? How do they talk about generating pipeline? 40% of pipeline fully situated ought to come from marketing, but 20 to 30 ought to come from the AE, and not the BDR. The AE generating pipeline. Do they believe in that? What's been their process for developing pipeline? As a rep in that situation that we painted, how have they built pipeline? If channel comes up as the first thing they talk about, it's a problem.
Right.
Right out of the gate. It's got to be their activity on a daily, weekly basis to go do it. Another one would be have they ever been a part of a hiring process? How would they think about hiring? How would you know when the time is to fire somebody? How would they think about doing this type of situation? What kind of research do you think they do? Those are just basic questions that would tell you a lot. And I think the obvious other one is have them talk in depth about how they sourced the deal, how they developed the deal, how they closed the deal, and ask 2 or 3 examples to see if you see the methodology. Can they get their mind out of that and really talk about a methodology that would be akin to the kind of methodology you think you need?
Yeah.
The founder-led sales that you had.
Right. Yeah, I think that, it's key, because I think in sales, it's a process.
Yes.
I mean, and the best are able to articulate that process in terms of what it is that made them successful and why they were able to close what they closed. And it doesn't mean it's going to be a identical process in this new company, but the point is it's a process, because that's the only way you drive repeatability is with the process. Otherwise, it's, fingers crossed, we'll hope we hire, rock stars that can kind of figure that out on their own. But really what you want is someone who thinks about it in a systematic way and can articulate that, because then they can teach other AEs, they can teach the rest of the organization how to close.
Well, it is a process, but early days, if you rely too much on the process that is too generic and is not tailored to the actual business, that could be fool's gold as well.
Yes,
right? You're trying to manage that input, cycle time, output when it doesn't belie the sophistication that really needs to be there. I think that's what we're saying is there's big grade inflation right now. CROs don't manage marketing and even customer success, and they have CRO titles. I think give them whatever title they need to get, as long as it doesn't impact compensation. But at an A or a B, you need somebody who's freaking grounded in winning deals, hiring talent, really working out what would be the process that could scale, the specifics of how you do discovery, how do you demonstrate capabilities in a POC or a POV, how do they think about pricing and proposals, How do they really demonstrate value to our customer? All those things. They should exude that kind of knowledge. And if you get a little spidey sense that they're not systematic,
Right.
whoa,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah, it's hard. It just isn't it won't scale.
Yeah.
So let's see. So we talked about the spec. We talked about the performance plan, and thinking about how they would put that together. What other kind of
Yeah, I think another hack around this is, let's take the spec. And it's the first place I start, and the CEO needs to do this, is take that Venn diagram, the 3 elements we talked about, plus the stage appropriate, and figure out what are the 3 to 5 must-have criteria. Must-haves and nice-to-have criteria. Write them down.
Yep.
Number them. What's the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 critical criteria? Not more than 5, or it's a waste of time. And what are the other nice-to-have criteria? You set that, and then step back from it. Let's take, I think you would want somebody who's ideally got multiple years of sales experience, so multiples more than 2.
Yep.
Not the classic you'll see in resumes now, born in this last acid crazed revenue situation. Everybody's in a role for 18 months, before they really go and gets tough. Is multiple years, so that then help your sourcers or yourself be objective before you meet these people, but using what I call red and yellow flags. If you want somebody that's got minimum of 3 years of sales leadership experience, if they got 2, that's a red flag. You're not talking to that candidate.
Right.
If there's somewhere in between there, it's a yellow flag. Okay. And if they have all the other criteria, great. But set objective criteria and measure in what's the yellow or red flag in those situations. And if you're working with a sourcer, or even if you're doing the LinkedIn source, it really helps to be objective in that situation.
Right.
So really define spec, prioritize, and then really declarative about red and yellow flags about those critical requirements.
In all these things we've talked about, one thing we haven't hit on is culture.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of people approach the sales exec role and they think about, I need someone who's just an, absolute animal, just gonna close. But culture turns out, it's an important dynamic with a sales exec too. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's been a journey for me because I grew up at Xerox when it mattered, Cisco in the heyday. It wasn't really until I was at HP with 3 CEOs in 18 months. You don't really know culture. I didn't really understand how important culture was until I experienced it badly. And, it's just kryptonite for the organization. And I think the company that they keep is a signal to it. So companies can be known really well for their culture. Glassdoor is a window on that culture to some extent, right? And I would have a cultural dimension as part of the interview, finite interview questions you're going to ask. It's got to be and really peel into challenging situations and get examples of where they overcame adversity. Maybe also how they overcame adversity in life as well is a good marker to the kind of culture they can have. Have them talk about what great culture really means to them, and if it's specific and really actionable, it implies they really thought about that.
Right. Yeah, and I think, to me, it's there's no right or wrong culture necessarily. There are obviously examples of kryptonite, like you said, but it's also too, I think, largely a function of finding that kind of right match in terms of the way they're going to behave internally within your company, the way they sort of go about the world. And there's some companies that are just very hard charging. They're very direct. That's the way they operate. They like people getting called out in meetings, and that's just the way that they operate. There's other companies where if you were to do that, it would create tremendous problems, right? And things are handled differently. So yeah, I think you're right. How they handle challenging situations and just trying to match that up.
Yeah, having managed on the East Coast versus the West Coast, something I've noticed is in the East, they kind of front stab you if they're going to come after you on things. In the West, typically there's a little bit of backstabbing going on.
Yeah.
And why do we need to stab anybody? Why can't we just have open communications, fact-based, really be passionate about a perspective? But once the decision is made to go forward, it can't be no pocket beatings and that.
Right.
And you can ask for examples of where they had to go the company way. They may not have agreed it, how they did with that. I think another point too, I learned the hard way in my career. What if you have a top performer who's a freaking disaster culturally? What do? How long do you just let that person continue to perform at a high level, but they're cancerous in organization?
Yeah, the days are numbered.
Yeah,
almost always.
Yeah, and there's the way to really do this is GE crafted it. It's kind of a 9-block. You don't have to be that sophisticated. You can whiteboard your cohort of folks with the CEO and the sales leader on a quarterly basis. Behavior, high, low. Performance, high, low on the horizontal axis, and plot the rest. If you got somebody that's high performance but low behavior, cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, as I'm thinking about culture too, I mean, one of the things that's kind of a new phenomenon with a lot of the remote working today, you hire, it's really any exec, but certainly a sales exec who needs to, interact with virtually everybody in the company, you need some face time. Like you're going to have to spend some time getting everybody together and getting on the road and doing that because, Slack and email is not going to cut it. Right?
Yeah, totally.
It just won't, right? Things will get lost. People's feelings will be hurt. They're going to misinterpret things. You got to build a foundational relationship for those challenging situations that are, they're going to occur in any organization, right? It's just, par for the course.
Yeah, I mean, there's some time-honored truths that will be repeated until they're learned, I guess. It's quarterly business reviews shouldn't be a presentation. It should be a discussion about the business. It should be field travel around it. It should be supported by monthly field travel. The CEO, the senior rainmakers in organizations need to be in the field on a regular basis, not only to close the revenue that's needed right now, but for product roadmap specs, and to really make sure that whatever culture that you want to permeate gets into the field on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And Zoom is so challenging to get the whole person. Man, you're making 4 calls a day, 2 days on a travel visit. There's so much time in between. You're going to really know that person and make an emotional connection with that person too, right? It's one now that more and more folks are back to with the pandemic over. And being in the field is such a great, it's cheating because all the answers are right there.
Yeah, you just got to listen and look.
Yeah.
So one thing we haven't talked about that we were talking about earlier is kind of the importance of at least thinking about diversity in that hire in a sales org. We got to talking about it because to me it's, I don't know, maybe it's a misnomer like diversity because it gets caught up in all the political hoo-ha, but really it's about, it just is about hiring the best people. And I have seen this happen in sales organizations where, you end up hiring somebody and then they end up hiring people that look exactly like them. And before you know it, you have this bro fraternity setup of AEs, which, look, I'm sure they're all great people, but it's going to be very hard to get anybody that doesn't look like that to want to go work there.
Yeah.
And so I think thinking about this right when you're hiring your exec, it's important. And some people might say, well, it's important in every executive position. Well, of course it is. It's important in every, but the reason I think about it more in sales is because sales, at least in B2B SaaS, that's going to be a big organization over time.
That's
I mean, that if you do your job right, that's an organization that every year you're going to be adding a lot of people to it to continue to grow the business. And so getting the foundational components right It's really important.
That's a deep topic. I'd say for me, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And out of college,
Me too. I've said it before as a venture investor. Yeah. All my success is due to my smarts. Yeah.
I went into Xerox in the late '80s when they had this program called Leadership Through Diversity, and they'd done the business case on why hiring for diversity actually makes better business sense. And if you think about groupthink, well, everybody's thinking the same way about a particular thing. That's not optimal.
Right.
You want rich discussion. You want a thoughtful, considered opinion about everything that you do. And how do you get that if everybody is, fishing from the same pier?
Right.
So that has to be said at a corporate level. And it's an X factor for hiring great talent.
Yes.
And a great outcome of COVID really is, you need people in the office, but they don't need to be in the office 5 days a week. They need to be out in front of customers, and you can hire remotely to a greater degree than you ever could.
Yep.
So that means you can be fishing off of a more diverse pond for the type of talent looking for. I think the other thing people don't think about is, what does your customer base look like?
100%.
You want to mirror your customer base to some extent.
Yep.
People buy from people they like.
Yep.
Right?
This goes back to you about you're talking about the customer experience, right? I mean, if you've never sold into Wall Street, that's going to be a tough road as a VP, trying to cut your teeth on it and trying to build the organization. They want to, buy from people they know, they understand, that speak their language. Yep.
Yeah, and I think if you hire 10 sales reps, they're all white males. You're gonna have a hard time hiring women.
Yeah,
they're gonna look at that and say, well, there's nobody like me in the organization.
Right. Yeah. And again, all those guys could be great, but it's just you got to think about that going into it, because if you really want to hire the best people, you got to set that out at the beginning, because I've just seen it a couple of organizations over the years just really snowball, and unwinding that takes a tremendous amount of work.
I have this, maybe it's kind of a Marxism, but 3 E's that I kind of think about for hiring. And it ironically will lead you to hiring women. And I think top sales leaders, top sales reps have 3 E's. First is they got a strong ego. They're going to walk through walls to make things happen. And they handle adversity well. You can see it in their resumes. They're proud of the accomplishments they've had. There's a lot of numbers in their resume. If there's not a lot of numbers in a sales leader's resume or sales reps, that's a problem. But the second E is empathy, and they're willing to work with the customer, get around a round table to get win-win situations. And then third is energy. Sales is a number game. Sales leadership's a numbers game. Harder to work, the luckier you get. And I just think women are really wired better on the empathy piece. And we're generalizing for sure. And to be honest, I think women on the energy piece multitask better than guys do. So it's really ironic to me that there's not more women in sales tech roles or even sales leadership roles, when I think they're wired more appropriately for the challenge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how much that goes to what the organizations are set up or the questions people ask or what, but certainly hiring the best people just means you really got to be thinking about, having to cast a wide net and setting the foundations.
I think that the last thing too is there's always, you've raised money, time's your foe, not your friend, and you want to hire fast. I'd say bad breath is no antidote for no breath. You should really take your time to hire well and as very thoughtful as you can. So that
no butts in seats philosophy for you.
No, because we all know tech debt. You can create sales debt in a hurry.
Yeah.
By hiring the wrong people.
Yeah. No, you can. Yeah, you hire that old adage. You hire someone who's maybe a B player. They hire C players. The C players hire D players.
Yeah.
Before you know it,
Well said.
yeah, you don't have a good GPA.
Yeah. No, you don't.
So no, that's super important. I know it can be frustrating too. You're trying to hire the right person, and you just want to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, great sales leaders will look at who's already been hired. I wouldn't work with these people, or I would work. I'm attracted because they're really hiring great talent. It breeds success by taking it slow and hiring well.
Maybe the last thing to hit on that it's sort of maybe stating the obvious, but I'm just shocked how few people do it is references and how important doing the references really are. And I think they're going to give you references that you ought to call, and I think a lot of people have to view those references are useless. I'm not going to learn anything. It's just not true.
Right.
Because often, usually the references are not going to be disqualifying. You're not going to hear something like, "Oh, this guy's a criminal." Hopefully, you've already figured that stuff out. But you're going to hear more color on a lot of the interview and questions and performance plan that you already have, and you're able to then put context around some of those stories, and really kind of square a lot of that up, which is important. And of course, if you can do a backdoor reference with someone you know, or even that you don't know, and you reach out to them, I mean, it's all good. I usually try to do them towards the kind of second half of the process, because I always find them to take a lot of calories. I feel like I'm taking up a lot of people's time. Mm-hmm. But you were mentioning earlier, sometimes you try to do some of these things at the front end. Yeah.
Now, that's because I've lived in the sales environment for so long. So to me, with LinkedIn, if I see a candidate that has come to my attention, 60% of the time I'm going to find somebody that I can have a private conversation with, and will stay private about this candidate. I try to DQ candidates on it.
Yeah.
By doing backdoor references as quickly as possible, not even get them in the process. Now, CEOs, again, back to CEOs, there's kind of a disconnect on hiring sales leaders. Maybe they don't have that connectivity. They may not be able to do that. But if you can backdoor reference up front, I really try to do that.
And again, this goes too, if you don't know that context, working with someone that does,
yes,
who's going to be part of that interview team, help you evaluate the performance plan, help you do some of that backdoor reference. That'll really give you additional.
Yeah, that's why I think even if you're pre-revenue, it's great to. That's not going to stay that way for long. So it's great to hire in a go-to-market advisor or a consultant who has that kind of network. Right. That's going to be able to vet candidates. My engagements with my CEOs, I'm really critical. I'm really leading that interview process with them. And a key element of that discovery of the candidate. But back to the references towards the end, is the composition of those references is really critical. Yeah, they're gonna give you the ones they want to give you, but you should ask for different references that you think would be insightful up front from different companies or first line managers they've had, or even customers.
Right.
Really not done anymore. Pretty old school thing. But ask for customer references. That'll tell you a ton. Can they get them?
Right.
What level are they?
Right.
Is it a manager level or the right level that you really need?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I haven't done a customer reference on a sales executive very long time.
And the other thing is, how are you going to approach the reference? Don't do it on the drive down the 101. Spend some time on it. And I like setting it up as, hey, this person was, looks like a really critical person in your organization in the past as a sales leader or a sales rep. I take it to heart that I'm going to be their next milestone in their career. I really love your coaching and guidance on that person's fit, because obviously they're going to find something that fits for them best. My goal is make sure this is the right fit for them. And then also ask them for thoughtful points about where are their gaps, where would be the area that they need more development on, so that you can address that for them. And really, how did they manage that person? And I'd like for them to step out and say, what have I not asked that I should have? But how would you have managed that person differently the second time around, right? So don't ask freaking standard questions. Be thoughtful about the questions and get them to step out of the obligatory reference call.
Right. Yeah. Great. I think that's a good place to sort of to pause. It's a lot. Well, listen, I hope there's been a little, a few nuggets here in terms of trying to hire your first VP of sales. It's all the exec roles are hard to hire, but hopefully there's been a little bit here that gives you just a little bit more insight and knowledge, at least to how, we think about it. I appreciate you watching and listening. Leave any comments down below, and hopefully if you're up to it, we'll put together some more content, some
Giddy up, it's been
videos.
fun.
All right. Well, thanks.